This one video will be about classical Greek society. Our overview for today, what we'll cover is Greek society. It's comprised of different independent city-states that shared a culture and religion. Ancient Greeks were unified by their traditions, like the Panhellenic Games, kind of like our Olympics. Greek architecture was designed to facilitate religious ceremonies and common civic spaces. Look at that architecture. Very nice. Religious and government responsibility. These cities are independent. Ancient Greece was comprised of hundreds of essentially independent city states, partially due to geography of Greece. It's so rocky, they're all kind of separated. Communities were separated by mountains and hills and water. Rather than a unified nation, ancient Greece was more like a network of communities with a shared religion and language that sometimes led to a sense of common belonging, what we would call nationalism today. Despite these cultural commonalities, affiliations between city states were loose and short lived. The Delian and Peloponnesian leagues, for example, were dominated by one strong city state. Another good example is how conflict was with Persia prompted several city-states to unify against a common enemy, but not all Greek city-states were involved. Further, once the external threat was diminished, conflict began between the city-states. Even as Greeks colonized the Mediterranean and Black Seas, new colonies, while recognizing a mother city-state, were largely independent. Even after Philip II of Macedon brought mainland Greece under his League of Corinth, the individual city-states still retained much of their essential independence. I mentioned they had a shared culture and religion in the overview. The ancient Greeks were unified by traditions like the Panhellenic Games and other athletic competitions. These competitions also had religious significance and were often tied to Greek mythology. The most significant of these games was the Olympic Games. Yes, they invented those. The ancient Olympic Games were a sporting event held every 4 years at the sacred site of Olympia in honor of Zeus, the supreme god of Greek religion. Involving participants and spectators from all over Greece and beyond, the Olympic Games were the most important cultural event in ancient Greece and were held from 776 BC to 393 BCE, Common Era. A run of 293 consecutive Olympics. In the ancient Greek world, religion was personal, direct, and present in all areas of life. It revolved around myths which explained the origins of mankind and gave the gods a human face. Temples dominated the urban landscape, and city festivals and national sporting and artistic competitions were very frequent. So religion was never far from the mind of an ancient Greek. Individuals in Greek society probably had varying degrees of religious belief, and some may have been skeptics. But Greek society could only function as it did because certain fundamentals were generally accepted throughout society. The gods existed, they could influence human affairs, they were welcomed and responded to acts of piety and worship. The temple was the place where, on special occasions, religion took on a more formal tone. Gods were worshipped at sacred sites and temples in all major Greek communities um, during ceremonies carried out by priests in their attendants. At first, sacred sites were merely a simple altar in a designated area, but over time, massive temples were built in honor of the particular god. These temples usually housed a cult statue of the deity being honored. Two famous examples are the huge statue of Athena in the Parthenon of Athens and the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Athletic games and competitions in music and theater, both tragedy and comedy, were held during festivals honoring particular gods, such as the City Dionysia of Athens in the Panhellenic Games at the sacred site of Olympia, Delphi, Nemea, and Isthmia. These events were attended by visitors from all over Greece, and the experience was perhaps more akin to a pilgrimage rather than a modern sporting event. It had this religious overtone to going to the game. Warfare was prohibited during these sacred events, and pilgrims were guaranteed free passage across Greece. Life in the polis. Remember, polis is city. Although individual polices, plural for polis or city state, each had their own particular institutions and practices. There were several features common to the majority of city states. In most polices, the majority of the population lived in the city rather than being spread across small farm communities in the surrounding territory. Also, the heart of the urban area was usually a sacred space with one or more temples. You can see that here in the picture. From the 7th century BC, cities were usually fortified with city walls, Sparta being a notable exception. The agora space was a common public area and created for civic and commercial activity. From the 5th century BC, many these cities displayed evidence of town planning, especially newly established colonies, with specific areas in the city designated for private, public, and religious functions. Many cities also had designated spaces for public assembly, either for political purposes or for entertainment, for example, like a theater or a gymnasium. In Greek society, men were the most powerful group, but other social groups, like women, children, enslaved people, freed people, and laborers, could make up as much as 90% of the total population of a city. All these groups had to be included and involved in the city in order for it to function as a cohesive community. One way of doing this was to create a sense of solidarity by fostering a social identity that differentiated that city from all other cities. This identity was achieved in various ways, such as the creation of a communal space where people could mix and socialize. This was the agora. You'd go there to hang out. City specific festivals and celebrations on specific dates in the year, usually of a religious nature, reinforced the idea that the city had a unique, often mythical founder and patron deity. So, what do you think? Why did the geography of Greece prevent city states from being geographically unified? And what were some common features you'd find in a Greek city state?